welcome to the Law Center videocast. I'm your host and founder of the Law Center, Larry DiMarco. Thank you for joining us today. If you watch my videocasts and any other videos on the Law Center YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, and comment. This will allow more people to watch and enjoy the Law Center videos. Today, we're here with Dr. Lynn Steinberg. She's a forensic psychotherapist, has a doctorate in clinical psychology, and she specializes in parental alienation as an expert in the courts and consults with alienated parents and lawyers. She provides a 4-day therapeutic intervention program, which has a near 100% success rate. Doctor, thank you for being a guest on the Law Center videocast.
Thank you for having me, Larry. I like your videos very much, and I use them a lot in training, so I'm happy to be here.
Well, very happy to have you as well, and thank you for saying so. Dr. Steinberg, why are you passionate about the work that you do?
Well, I have several reasons. One is that about 11 years ago, I started noticing that some of the families who came in, it just didn't make sense what was happening, because one parent was basically being kicked out of the family, and the children really couldn't say why they were rejecting that parent. And I saw that over and over again, and I saw that normal family theory, systems theory did not work with these families. And I vaguely remembered reading something about Richard Gardner and his theory and Ludwig Lowenstein when I was in the Ph.D. program. And so I went back to the books to see what the dynamics were so I could understand them and treat them. But more so, as I was reading, I realized that this was happening to me and had been happening to me for quite a long time. My daughters at that time were about 20 and 21, and they had been being alienated by their father against me for probably about 8 years at that point. And so I decided then that I just couldn't put up with it anymore. I waited for them to get through college, thinking that we could deal with it once they got through college and they were adults. And I left. And the day that I left, my ex-husband managed to alienate not only my children from me, I've barely spoken to them since, and that was 11 years ago. And he also alienated my friends against me and tried with my colleagues. But my colleagues were the only ones who approached me and said, "What's going on? You know, this sounds like a crazy person you were married to." And so they were the ones who really could see what was happening, even though they didn't know about parental alienation. So that's how I got into it and made it a specialty of mine. And now that's all I do. I just work with alienated families and the courts and lawyers and try to win cases in that respect.
So how did you get into that specialty? Did you go and look for the work, or did that work find you?
I think it found me, now that I think about it. I started reading everything I could get my hands on. Then I started looking for like-minded people. And actually, Cindy Hirsch of ISNAF, right when I started looking into it, organized the first conference by ISNAF and had several of the experts like Steve Miller, Linda Gottlieb, Craig Childress, and they were lecturing at that time, Amy Baker, and I knew I was home at that point. And so then I started to take conference training wherever I could get it, and started working with the families first and DCFS. But I realized that was not very successful when I tried to work with the alienator and DCFS. And so I moved on to training the court system about parental alienation by being an expert.
Very good. Doctor, tell us your work about your work in reunification, that subspecialty, family reunification, because I understand that traditional therapy doesn't work. And Dr. Miller famously says it's actually worse than worthless. It's harmful. So please tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I first started, people were still talking about family systems theory. And what that theory is that it believes that there is a system in family and everybody's equally involved in it. But that's not so in parental alienation. One person is turning the children against the other parent as an act of revenge. And they are 90% to blame, as Linda Gottlieb says. And the other parent is probably participating in that dysfunction 20%. So a therapist recently said to me, because I gave him a bunch of your videos to watch, and when I met with him again, he said, I feel like I need to go back to school and get another Ph.D. because everything I learned, I have to throw out about working with alienated families. And that's really true. But what I did in working, of course, I went to one of Linda's workshops and, read up on it. But in my own dealing with it, I found that there's several problems that have to be dealt with in the 4-day intervention. The first one is a lack of empathy. The second one, not necessarily in this order, but back and forth, is the over-empowerment of children. And that's not talked a lot about by any of the experts, but I find that to be the major problem. So when the children come in, the minute we start, they're calling the parent by the first names and telling them they're going to kill them and, threatening them and themselves. And the first thing I do is stop that. And I say, look at your dad when he talks. You can't call your mom by her first name. She's mom to you. And I just intervene on that level all the time until, you can almost see their sense of power reducing and the alienated parents' power increasing. And I always have the back. And that's what Ludwig Lowenstein said, always have the alienated parents' back because they're so disempowered. And there is no empathy for by the children. Like there was a dad who was kicked out of the room. His wife kicked him out, and he was sleeping in the living room on the floor because the children had, quote unquote, no more room in their bedrooms. And so he was the one who was sleeping on the floor for years. And she also said that she wasn't going to cook for him anymore. So he'd work the whole day to support the family. He'd come home at around 8 p.m. He'd be so hungry that he would help himself to little bits off the kids' plates who had been sitting there eating for a while. And so the wife phrased that as him stealing food off the children's plates, and the children picked that up. And in the 4-day intervention, that's one of the things I worked on over and over again. Well, don't you have any empathy for your dad? I mean, he worked 8 hours more, 10 hours to make sure that you guys are provided for. And he's sleeping on the floor in the living room. And you're mad at him because he left and he has to open cans of food. What is this? This is like torture. And we talk about the Stockholm Syndrome, how the children in this case identify with the abusive parent, and also deal with the false accusations that have taken place because when they come to me, they're severely abused, severely alienated. And so they've also made
The
a lot.
parents, not the children, the parents, of course.
Yes.
Right.
And the children are abused and alienated,
As well.
As
Mhm.
well, because you might leave an alienator because you're being treated so badly, but that's not necessarily not going to happen to the children as well. I mean, many children who've gotten out of that environment have told me that they too suffered abuse and they were really afraid of that alienating parent. So
And this is to contrast what traditional therapy would do, which instead of stopping and correcting the children, would just get the children to talk about their feelings. I understand.
Yes, the traditional therapists are 100% supportive of children, and they say children never lie. Now, anyone who's had a child knows that children really lie. I know that my 3-year-old nephew, his mom said to him, did you eat all the candy? And his little cheeks were all puffed out, because he'd stashed all the candy in. And he said, no, I didn't have a bite. And that's a very benign lie. But children can lie terribly, as you know. I mean, accuse their parents of sexual abuse when that never happened. Like, for example, one child had accused his father of sexually abusing him, and his dad was a doctor, and they were considering taking away his medical license. And when I said to the child, when they were all in here for a 4-day, well, what do you mean your dad sexually abused you? Describe it. And he, of course, was very ashamed and felt very guilty. But what he said was, well, one day we were playing in the pool and my dad picked me up and threw me. And when he threw me, he touched my testicle. I was like, that is not sexual abuse. And, the social workers had believed that he was sexually abused. And I had to go to court with the dad and say these children were not sexually abused, and nor were they abused by their dad. And then, of course, his medical license was not under investigation anymore. But parents can suffer incredibly as a result of this dynamic.
So I do want to ask you, and I'm going to ask you to summarize, which is like summarizing War and Peace in a very short method. But can you summarize some of the indicators and symptoms of parental alienation to give the listener just a general understanding of what parental alienation is?
Well, one thing is that children will completely reject a parent and their former extended family, whom they were most often very close to, their grandparents or their aunts and uncles, cousins. They don't talk to them anymore. That's one indicator. And it's only with alienated families that one parent is completely rejected, because even abused children want to have a relationship with the abusive parent, maybe not live with them, and they would live with that parent's extended family, which alienated children will refuse to do. So that's one part. The other part is they had a formerly good relationship, positive relationship with the alienated parent. The third thing is that they were not abused. If there was abuse and now they're being alienated, that's what's called a hybrid case. And contrary to what Joan Myers says, there are no more definitions than that one definition for what a hybrid case is. And they are actively being alienated by the alienator by listening to that person badmouth the other parent. So those are some of the factors that one looks for.
So these cases are counterintuitive, and they often need expert witness and forensic testimony. Can you talk a little bit about your family consulting services and, of course, expert testimony?
Sure. What I do is when I'm an expert, I hardly meet with either parents, the alienator or the alienated parents. And I would meet maybe with the alienated parents and the lawyer to find out exactly, what's going on with the case and ask for the documents I want. Then I comb through the documents, and usually they're pretty voluminous. And it takes me quite a while to get through all of them. And then I will write a report. And that report is based on where I find parental alienation. And it's not hard to find. It's easy to find because the police will document it, DCF will document it. It shows up in the court. Like, for example, one mother just held up the whole court. She interrupted everybody. And I wrote in my report that holding court has a whole new meaning for me because she just manipulated everybody and talked the whole time, and to the point that nobody knew what they were doing. So I put that in my report too. So I keep pointing out what all these behaviors are and how they relate to the literature, and basically educate the court about what goes on, including talking about counterintuitive aspects of parental alienation.
And you've taken all your experiences and you have written a book. You're Not Crazy. What's the
Yes.
story behind your decision to write it, and what do you cover in the book?
Well, people were calling me after the first year, I think, and wanted to know what parental alienation was and what they should do. And I realized I was answering the same questions over and over again. It was good for me in that I absolutely knew the answers. But I thought, well, I'm just going to write it in a book so people can get the book and they'll have it available to them. So I do a step-by-step process on how to either represent oneself in court, or how to hire a lawyer, how to hire a therapist, because like you said, going to regular therapists will often exacerbate the parental alienation rather than improve the relationship with the alienated parent. And so I talk about all these different aspects in the book: the history of alienation, what kind of science there is out there, how to choose people to be on your team. Because if you don't choose someone who's familiar with parental alienation, you're going to spend a lot of money and not get anywhere, which I've seen alienated parents absolutely go bankrupt from it all. So I also talk about legislation and the countries that do have legislation against parental alienation and what needs to happen, like in the United States, and which laws we're dealing with right now that are important to defeat, because they would put us back in the dark ages as far as parental alienation is concerned.
You're anticipating my next question, that you're active with the legislation and legislative issues related to parental alienation. So what are the laws that are needed in reference to parental alienation, and how do you get involved in helping to make that happen?
Well, I think everybody knows about Caden's law, which was signed into law by President Biden in March. And I think that he really didn't read the law before he signed it, because I don't think he would have signed it if he'd known the repercussions involved. This law was written by Violence Against Women. And what it said was that women could, when they claim domestic violence, she would be believed, and the husband, man, father could not in turn claim that there was parental alienation, which you can see is just ludicrous. and there's quite a bit of money attached to it. And the way they described it, the violence against women people, was that there were millions of dollars attached to it. So it has to be ratified by each state. But this didn't happen in two of the states that it got passed in, but we looked into it, and there was actually only $200,000 attached to this bill. So it wasn't worth what the legislature in each state thought it was going to be worth in terms of revenue. And so we have fought it here in California. One thing they did have was training for judges, but the amount of training was completely exorbitant and off the scales. And we did get the judges to support us here in California because they were kind of asleep at the wheel. You know, they didn't know this was going through.
Sure.
But we enlightened them, and they also fought against the bill with us, and we managed to kill the bill. Part of the problem was they had sneakily filed it as an education bill. So we didn't get notified about it, and we had to go in at the last minute. And we were prepared to go all the way to the governor's level to veto it, but we actually got the Senate to withdraw it after we mounted a huge defense. There were about 8,000 people who called in and wrote in and said, please, don't allow this bill to go through. It also, the way they changed it, it also ordered no programs like mine or any kind of reunification therapy. And the other part of it was that if a child looked bonded to a parent, they couldn't remove that child, which goes completely against Steve Miller's counterintuitive idea. You know, if somebody looks bonded, it doesn't mean they really bonded. It means they've aligned themselves with that parent for their own safety.
And there's more battles going on across the country, I understand. Do you get involved in those or consult for?
Yeah, we are trying to do that. We're trying to create a template here in California because we've defeated a few bills, and one of them they even let me rewrite. It was a bill to reduce the age of children who were allowed to testify in court. And I got a huge objection to it, and the senator let me rewrite the bill. We had to keep the 14 years able to testify, but we changed it to only testify to the judge with no one else there. But even so, I mean, the American Bar Association says that children will repeat whatever the alienated tells them to repeat at the rate of 86%, which is very high. And I tried to tell the judges, I write declarations and say, this is what the statistics are, and this is what you're going to hear in this situation. So please do not put children in the position of testifying in open court against a parent, because
Sure.
it will increase their shame and guilt.
I understand that you also lecture or educate and teach judges on the dynamics of parental alienation.
Yes, we'd like to do that more, of course. Yeah, we've developed a couple of courses, and we try to coordinate with other people in the country who are doing it so that we can get to as many judges. But now we have a list of them, and we call them up and say, hey, do you know that this is happening, and would you have us talk about it? And so, things I think are really getting better everywhere about parental alienation. I know those people still in court and fighting for their children are very discouraged, and they think, more should be happening. I agree with that, but I also think that more is happening than did 10 years ago.
Can you give our viewers some helpful tips when they find themselves in a situation of parental alienation?
I would say educate yourself as much as you can on what the dynamics are. Hire a lawyer if you can. who knows about parental alienation or who is at least open to having an expert consult with them so they know what to do in court. Have all your ducks in the row. And in my book, I say what that is, like which documents you should have, what you should know about. Just basically be very prepared. So you go in there. The other thing is that don't go in there a wreck, that you're crying and being angry, because that will turn the judge off and you won't get anywhere. They'll rule against you because, the alienator is usually, as Steve Miller also said, calm, collected, charming, and will charm
Confident.
the judge. Calm. Yeah.
Confident.
Confident,
Four C's, I think Dr. Miller calls those.
Exactly. And the alienated parent is a nervous wreck, Yeah.
Angry, agitated, anxious.
Yes.
And,
one more.
Yeah, one more there, right? So how are children affected by parental alienation? A little bit about the stakes here.
Well, the consequences are dire. And I mentioned to you feeling ashamed and guilty. And when I do the 4-day interventions, children express a lot of shame and guilt. And one of the things that they consistently say when they begin to realize what happened is that they can't believe that their alienated parent even wants to have a relationship with them. And one young woman said, well, maybe I better have therapy and get it together before I have a relationship with my dad. And I said, no, your dad wants to have a relationship with you. He wants to be there for you. He forgives you. I know that. So call him up and have a relationship with him. So there's also a lot of depression. I've had a number of alienated children who just never could come to terms with it, commit suicide. I know that there's murders that take place. And there's eating disorders, substance abuse disorders that are consequences. We've seen a lot of identity issues taking place because the children don't know who to identify with, and probably some more that I'm not thinking of. But the consequences are dire, and this is a multi-generational issue. So like with me, I was an alienated child and I married an alienator because that was so familiar to me. My mother was the alienator. So I think that can happen. And I'm concerned about my daughters. I actually don't even know if they have gotten married, but I know that neither of them had serious relationships after this all came about.
Doctor, I'm certainly sorry to hear that the effects of parental alienation to you, your family, and of course all our viewers and listeners. And I also understand you have free resources on your website. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, if you go to my website, this is especially important if you're representing yourself, but even if you're not representing yourself, lawyers often download these. I have declarations and information on my website, and you can download it. Like one of the things I have are the ways in which I use the coercive control law to prove parental alienation, because what is parental alienation if it's not coercive control of a child? And that law was not intended to be used for children, but it fits perfectly. And I've won more cases in court by using that law, because in California it's a law, and in many other states it's a law, or otherwise pending. And so one can use that law to win parental alienation, because I think no one else can argue that those children are being coercively controlled. So you can go to my website and download those documents and use what I write, how I explain parental alienation. You can use it in whatever documents that you provide to the court. So you don't really need an expert.
Good. And Doctor, thank you for that. And and thank you for sending all your contact information to learn more about Dr. Steinberg. Please go to the description portion of the video. But Doctor, for the people who are listening or driving with the video off, can you please tell us where we can go to learn more about you?
My website, which is Lynn Steinberg, LYNNSTEINBERG.com. And under resources, I think, is where you would find these free downloads. It also has a lot of videotapes, yours included, Larry.
Great.
So you can learn about parental alienation, and there's several links to articles and websites that may be helpful to you as well. And also my contact information. So if you do need help, I do offer 20 minutes free consultation. And after that, I do book a, consultation that you would have to pay for, but you can call me for 20 minutes and I'll try to help.
And viewers can also find your book, You're Not Crazy, Overcoming Parent-Child Alienation, directly in the description portion of the video. Doctor, I asked you a lot of loaded questions, and we've been succinct. You have been succinct and prompt. I want to thank you and acknowledge you for summarizing such a huge, complicated, difficult topic in such a short time. Thank you for being a guest on the Law Center videocast.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate that.
We've been here with Dr. Lynn Steinberg, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and comment. Check the description portion of this video where you can learn more about Dr. Steinberg and also the Law Center. Signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.